All right, what is up? Welcome to my channel in the beautiful backyard. Okay, so let's talk today about boundaries. I have gotten so many questions on boundaries, especially in relationships. Okay, so the question came from a woman in a relationship and just barely dating again, had gone through some really bad trauma. Once you've experienced some things, you're like, how do I know how to put certain boundaries in place? And what if they cross them? So I love this topic because it wasn't until I actually had my mentor explain this to me when I was going through my divorce, actually how mind blowing this is. So imagine that you're dating someone and you put these boundaries down and you're like, don't do this and 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 don't do this. So by putting boundaries down, I think we have to look at the word boundary itself. So I'm going to switch your mind from thinking the boundary is for them when actually the boundary is for you. Okay, once you understand this, you'll never operate the same because the boundaries that you stay within already allow for you to have experiences with people that A should be in your space and B deserve to be. So if you're setting boundaries or you're in an abusive, toxic, narcissistic relationship, like I have been in my past, the boundary was don't come home at 3 o'clock at night, and for hell's sake, please just stop doing drugs. Or it was, just stop watching pornography. And these are the boundaries and these are the rules because that makes me feel insecure. And that is really crappy. And you're not really being a husband. So those were my boundaries that I was setting up for him. So every time that I set a boundary out for him, it didn't allow for me to actually honor myself because the boundary was just like these big blocks that were keeping space between us. And most women, tell me if you believe this, you think the boundary is going to keep you safe. It's why you set the boundary, right? So, I mean, I'll just share something super personal. I had one request, just stop coming home at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, that's not cool. So that boundary, I believed if I set that up in place and if he would honor that, then I would be safe. So I want to start with this actualization that the boundary that we set, we're doing it for us, but we're giving them the boundary because we're waiting for them to make us feel safe. And so we're saying, don't do this because it doesn't make me feel safe. And don't do this because I don't feel secure when you do that, right? So we set all of these rules and expectations and boundaries up. And I like to think of boundaries as, like I said, like dividers. Like, this is my comfort zone and this is where I'm willing to stay. And as soon as you cross over my boundaries, then it's like, oh, hell no, like I'm out of here, right? So, the second idea that I want you to really try on and see if it works for you is the boundary you're putting in place, actually make that boundary for you and not for them. So, an example of that, going back to my example of, hey, you don't need to come home at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's not cool because that doesn't make me feel safe. It was setting a boundary with myself and then having to have integrity to follow through. Okay. Because once you start setting up boundaries, especially in a toxic relationship where there haven't been any, it is going to stir things up. It is going to shake things up, and sometimes not for the better because the other person is used to you flaking on your word. They're used to you getting angry and pissed and threatening to leave and then coming right back 2 days later, right? Or sometimes it's like you're willing to break your own standards because it's like, well, if I break my boundaries or my standards, or if I keep them, then they're not going to stay around, right? Like, we're afraid to honor ourselves at that level because we're afraid that the love won't exist or that person won't be there if we honor that standard or that boundary. So, what if you created boundaries based off of the simplicity that you would only set a boundary to keep yourself safe, because that's why you're doing it to begin with, is to really just feel safe, secure, and all the things. What if that boundary was for you? So, what if I had set up a boundary where, for myself, where I just wasn't willing to date a man who XYZ? That boundary for myself alone allows me to never have a conversation with another man in the future that I don't want him out gone all night, right? Especially being his wife. Like, I just don't love that. So, if I were to honor that boundary for myself, And really, that boundary could be another word for just a standard. If I was to honor my own boundaries, it eliminates all of the boundaries I'll have to set for someone else because I'm not protecting me. If that makes any sense, tell me if that resonates with you in the comments below. Tell me how that feels, or if it even sinks in, because I was mind blown, right? So a lot of the times when women are asking me like, okay, how do I set up a boundary? A, how do I do it, first of all? And B, like, what's a healthy boundary? That really comes and reflects back on you. Like, how willing are you to love yourself exactly where you are? And are you willing to raise your standards knowing that your biggest fear could actually be met? Your biggest fear is them leaving. Otherwise, you wouldn't tolerate the actions that are happening, right? To me, when someone asks, like, how do I set a healthy boundary? I'm actually hearing, like, how do I honor me more? How do I how do I do that? Because really your form of control in asking that question is, how do I control that person? You can't control it. Like, I can't control if he wants to come home at 3 in the morning or never come home again. Just because he married me doesn't mean he has to stay with me, right? And so it's these weird like control games that we play by setting down these boundaries. And eventually you have to realize, like, even if you do set a boundary down for that other person as a sign of respect for yourself, the only way that that boundary gets honored is if you keep your promise to yourself. Because if you let it happen once, right? If I'm like, hey, don't cross this line, it's not cool with me, I'm very clear on that. I know this doesn't feel good for me, right? And then if he crosses over it and I waver and I'm like, okay, like, I'll move the line like back here, and then he crosses it again, and then like I move the line back here, it's like I'm almost allowing that to happen because I don't honor what I say, I don't mean what I say, and then I don't honor the boundaries that I've put in place. And so that communicates to the person, the spouse or partner or the relationship, that I don't actually mean it, like I'm not serious. And so you have to ask yourself deeper questions than how do I set a boundary. Like, what is it that I'm actually not okay with, and what form of control am I looking for? Do I need to control the way that I'm operating in this relationship? Do I need to control the way that that I'm feeling when this behavior happens? Or is it just a form of self-love? Like, really, it's okay to put boundaries down. It's so, so, so okay. I just want you to recognize that the boundary isn't for the other person. It's not to control them. The boundary's for you. And I am a preacher on self-worth. It's why I quit my job and my career and my lifestyle to go help people and empower women, especially women, to rise above what they're going through. And that starts with self-worth. You know what's really cool though, is when you raise your boundaries and you set the boundary for you, you start weeding out naturally the behavior that you're dealing with right now because you're no longer available to it, right? Like, I don't have to set a boundary with my in my new relationship to say, hey, don't ever come home at like 3:30, 4 in the morning. Just don't do that. You wanna know why? Because after I had that experience and realized that I couldn't control my spouse and I had no business doing that, and saw that this was a reflection of my self-worth and what I was able to tolerate, once I stopped controlling him and saying, don't cross this line or I'm going to leave, and then never leave. Once I had to learn the hard way, what I'm preaching to you across the computer is that now, because I've raised my standards and my boundaries, because I'm not willing to date that type of person anymore, because I was willing to love myself so much and walk away, I was able to find someone else that I never had to communicate that. Like, I never will have that conversation again in my life. And I am sure, like I am sure, like I am sure. In fact, I will never have to say, don't do this and don't do this. In fact, that's probably the next video I'll make, because that leads into another huge conversation that women are having, which is, hey, my religious views and his religious views don't match. We don't believe in the same things. We don't act the same way, blah, blah, blah. Do I stay or do I go? And that is a huge topic because, well, I'll save that till the next video. So the boundary is for you. The boundary is an invisible line of your self-love. So instead of saying, hey, here's the boundary, don't hit me again, or hey, here's your boundary, you're going to stop cheating on me and I'm going to make sure that you stop doing it or I'm going to leave. Instead of putting the boundary down for the person, the boundary is actually for you. Okay, Bree, right? Me or you. to yourself, having a conversation, I am no longer willing to be cheated on. That might mean that I have to leave this relationship. That might mean they'll change naturally because I can't expect them to value me any more than I value me. Isn't that crazy? Like, we're sitting here putting these boundaries down for other people so that they essentially make us feel safe and like value us, but like we don't even value ourselves. Like, we're empty, just looking for something and someone to pull in so that we feel validated and we feel like we belong and we feel loved. And it's backwards, it's twisted. And so I love this because now when you honor your own self love and your own boundaries and your own, standards of what you deem tolerable, you will not call in that person anymore. And there's a lot of internal work that goes into this. I absolutely teach this. I'm actually going to encourage that you not just subscribe and smash the subscribe button, because I promise to put out content more than 2 videos a week right now. So I'm going to do that. But also, I've got the ability to dive deep with you and to help you discover what's really getting in your way, because it is really hard if you are in a toxic abusive relationship or you are just starting to date again, like this woman I was talking with. When you're getting back into the dating world, you're really discovering yourself, and that's okay. So I want to remind you that you haven't been in the game for a minute, and that's okay. But to not try to control it like 5 weeks out when you're on date like two. Like, it will unroll and unravel the way that it's supposed to. Just make sure before you go on date one that you're already following your intuition and you're connecting with your truth. Because if you're out there dating, again, trying to pull in something just to make you feel complete and fill the void, girl, you're gonna have to continue putting down boundaries, but you just haven't learned the lesson that they're for you, not for them. The people you're dating are a reflection of where your self-worth is actually at, so let that sink in. Because if you're attracted to the bad boy or you're attracted to the narcissistic man, and I say this with love because it was me, I was not attracted to the good man. Like, the man that just treats me right and doesn't have any chaos or any like drama going on in his life, I didn't know what to do with it. But again, that's because I wasn't raised in an environment where that was my example that was shown to me. So I'm not giving you excuses, but you may be attracted to this certain type of man because it's all that you know and it's familiar. So we've got to change that energy attraction, because you will continue pulling in that chaos and that drama just to show that you can handle it. I see a lot of women wear abuse like it's a badge of honor, and it is not okay. It is so freaking not okay. Like, I used to have this idea that I was being the good wife. Like, I was self-righteous and I was saving him, and like he had his own set of issues and addictions, and I just thought I could save him. So by saving him, like, I got this badge of honor of like self-righteousness, and that is such twisted dark thinking. And if that's where your consciousness is at, if that's the eyes that you're looking through, it's okay, because I've been there. I get you. You totally are not broken. But there is a reason that you believe that's love. So it comes back to boiling it back, boiling it back down to, what do you want? And if you want what you actually say you want, you will never allow yourself to set down boundaries that cross over what is totally not acceptable to you, or your self-worth, or your lifestyle, or the life that you're trying to create, right? Like, you can't actively tell me that you want this amazing, rich personality, loyal man, and then be over here and not be loyal and not be those things. And you are not going to attract what you want. You are going to attract what you are, who you are. So those are a couple of ideas to put on. But if I motivate you to do anything, it is that you should take the decision to set a boundary for yourself. And the problem I see with most women isn't that they don't know how to set the boundary, it's that they don't know how to follow through, because you've lied to yourself up until this point. So now it's hard to tell yourself the truth. But damn it, if you're not okay with something, and I'll use my example, if he comes home at 3 one more time, I'm going to have to love myself so much that I'm walking away. And I might make that little. It might just be, okay, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go back to my parents' house for a week. I don't know. I'm just saying it can be a small decision. But by making small decisions, it will allow you to build up the confidence to make the big leap. Right? So if you know that the boundary is going to get crossed, like, I think talking to you, there's some of you that know, like, that that behavior is going to happen again. Like it's just going to happen because you've lived with it for 5 years, or, you changed and now all of a sudden he's confused on what the hell you're doing and why are you trying to control him, whatever. You are so aware that that behavior is going to happen again that you're afraid to hold your boundaries. You're afraid to hold your ground because you know that he'll either leave or you'll have to. But what I'm saying is that it's so rewarding because it might suck in the short run, but in the long run, you'll never have to have this like question yourself on, well, should I set this boundary or not? It's really simple. Do you feel loved or not? Are you satisfied or not? Are you fulfilled or not? Do you feel respected or not? And we're not going to focus on them, right? We're not going to focus on how to get them to respect you. We're going to learn how to respect yourself. Because when you do that, you'll naturally attract the people that will naturally respect you, right? If you're still in that abusive, like toxic relationship, there are ways out of it. And it starts with this. Stop telling him what he can and cannot do, or her, and learn to value yourself, right? Like if you're not okay with the alcoholism or the drugs or the addiction or the pornography or whatever you're going through, or maybe it's just simple and it's not that dark and you guys are just newly dating, but you really don't like when something happens, it's totally okay to choose out at any given moment. Now, there's a difference between not being committed and quitting every time it gets hard. And there's another difference, which is what we're talking about. And that's just knowing that the boundaries you put in place are for you, because if you honor them, you'll always feel safe, right? Get to know people, get to know who they are. But before you can do that, you have to know who you are. Like I had to decide, am I willing to be the good wife who's willing to rescue my husband and let his addictions run our life and let it take me with, or do I got to set boundaries for myself and just decide that this isn't actually healthy for me and it's actually not serving me? Like that's the difference. That's the mind shift. It's not like, hey, if you cross this boundary, I'm going to beat you up and cause a fight and then we're going to have World War VI, because most people do. They approach it that way, right? The husband's like, you can't go out this late, or where are you going with your friends? And he tries to control her in multiple ways, or maybe he controls the finances and he controls her because he doesn't feel safe when she does XYZ. And then the wife is like, hey, or girlfriend, don't do this, don't do this. Why are you looking at her? And why are you on her Instagram, right? Like crazy, crazy insecure stuff. And so she gives him a boundary. Like, if you get on that girl's Instagram one more time, then I swear. It's like, no, it's not about if he does that one more time. It's what are you doing here to make yourself feel safe, to make yourself feel controlled here, right? Because you're trying to control something right here in your relationship to feel safe and it's not working. So you've got to pull back what your boundaries are and look at that. So I will leave you with this. Boundaries are awesome, and it starts with an evaluation of what your values are. What do you value and what are you willing to accept and tolerate, and what are you no longer willing to put up with? And the second thing, like I said, go like this video, go subscribe, hit the subscribe button, and then in the comments, tell me where you're really struggling with boundaries. I know for me, it was learned in childhood in the way that my parents operated with each other. And I find that most times we just duplicate what our parents showed us. So if you are ready to break some freaking serious patterns and get out of family entanglement, I actually help people do that. So let's schedule a one-on-one call. Let's jump on a call. Let's go change our lives and really share this with the next woman or person that needs it. And I hope you have an amazing Tuesday. Until next time.